me and Susan and reporting on your experiences at the end of the day. And some of those experiences include a little bit of disorientation. So, you know, if you get in your car and you don't know quite where you're going, or even if you start to walk and you kind of just feel momentarily lost, that's a sign of disorientation. Something has changed in you that has somehow affected the way you're operating in the world. And at that moment, you need to apply exactly what we're doing in this room, which is to create situations where you can continue to function and remain safe. So you just stop for a moment, you sit yourself down, you stand for a moment, and you just find where you are again. It's really important. It's really important. So give yourself time. Just because you're out of the door doesn't mean that this system that's you is out of the process. Yeah? It kind of rolls on, which is also something that we're after. Okay? So please lie on your left side. Now, if you can, could you use your left arm as a pillow in a very particular way? Could you lengthen out that left arm, have it on the floor above your head, and rest the side of your face on that arm? Now, if that is not comfortable for you, then use a pillow and have that left arm in front of you. That's my suggestion. And you know that comfort changes by moment. So you might start off feeling comfortable and then that changes. Or you might start off being not comfortable and it changes and you find that you can have your arm underneath you. So track yourself as we go through this lesson. Lie with your legs bent in front of you. Have your right hand on the floor in front of yourself, very, very close to you, so that it's almost as if your forearm is leaning on your abdomen, on your front somewhere. And remember that movement that you've been doing, where you move the front of yourself away from the hand, away from the forearm a little bit. Just recall it. Recall it as vividly as you can. Yeah, maybe the volume and maybe the kettle's going. Is the kettle going? No? I have no means of turning up the volume here, so I only have a binary switch. Oh, that's a good solution. There's more space down the front. There's a huge space right here. Look. Big. Big. I don't bite. The other solution is I can up my voice and hopefully project enough. Is that better? Okay, I can last an hour. Oh, that's fine. I'll speak up. So you were in the process of recalling. And remember from yesterday's talk, you're going into that realm of remembering experiences. not necessarily remembering verbal instructions. Two different things. Yes, you can recall instructions, but what would happen if you started to recall the experience of taking yourself backwards, flexing away from that hand, from that forearm? Now, maybe this has already happened to some of you. It's happened to me that I've dreamed that I'm doing an ATM. And the dream was really, really vivid. It felt like I was doing the ATM. In a funny kind of a way, I'm asking you to do that, to go so deeply into your recall that it feels like you're doing the ATM, of taking yourself a little bit backwards in the chest, a little bit backwards in the abdomen. And now start to actually do it. And do it in a way that continues to grow your experience of performing this action. So begin to enlarge your representation of what's actually happening. How many parts of you can you track as you move away from the hand and as you return to the hand? How am I going back there? Is that audible? Cool. Okay. Now, this practice that you're doing right at this moment of shifting your attention to different points or different places on yourself, and then finding out how that place moves in relationship to other places, that is a practice that you can do a lot with. Your right hand is on the floor in front of you. Some of you have got the logic of the lesson already so much in mind that you're actually taking it to the next step, which is really interesting. Yeah? Have the hand so close that you can feel the forearm up against yourself, and that's what you move away from. So you go from contact to out of contact. Contact with the forearm, the wrist, out of contact with the forearm and wrist. Now stop a moment and direct your attention to a very particular place on yourself. And that place is the very, very crown of your head. That part of your head that would be closest to the ceiling if you were standing up. And notice, what is the clarity of your idea of where that place is? How sure are you that that's really where you're thinking of is really the top of your head? Now, you could continue to rely on your memory and your proprioceptive sense of that. But what would happen if we use cross-referenced with another sensory modality? So take your right hand from the floor and touch the top of your head. So now you can use a different modality and start touching. You touch one place and ask yourself, is this the top of my head? And then touch another place and ask yourself, is this the top of my head? And then another place and ask yourself, is this the top of my head? So here's what you're doing now, what we were talking about yesterday. You are conducting an experiential, or what I like to say, somatic inquiry into a really peculiar concept of top of head. Where is that place? And is your perception of that place constant, or does it vary depending on your body position? So now let's make another inquiry. Take your hand away and roll your head a little bit backwards so that your nose is more or less up towards the ceiling. And now in this new position, touch the top of your head. And is it the same place with your head in a different orientation? Now, from a mechanical point of view, the top of the head would be that place where the head turns around its own axis. It will be a projection of the top of the spine right through to the top of the head. Now, for some of you, that has some meaning. For others, you're going, what the hell is he talking about? Return to having your head lying on your arm. Rest your hand on the floor in front of you. And with whatever idea that you have, whatever experience you have of the top of your head, pay attention to the top of the head and the soles of the feet as you start to move yourself backwards away from your forearm and go a little bit into flexion. And feel what happens between those two places. What is the relationship, the spatial relationship between the top of the head and the soles of the feet as you go into flexion and then as you return? Now start to make a little experiment or a little investigation. Is there a way of flexing yourself where you can generate easily, without effort, where you can generate the experience of the top of the head going away from the soles of the feet? You still know that you're flexing, but there's this sense of, wow, actually the distance is increasing between the soles of the feet and the top of the head rather than immediately decreasing. Absolutely. Yep. So there you are, paying attention to the spatial relationship between the top of the head and the soles of the feet. And when you start to flex yourself, very often the feeling is that the head and the feet come closer together pretty quickly. It's like scrunching yourself up. Yes? Now, could you do it in such a way that your initial experience isn't one of scrunching, but actually feeling more space in yourself so that the top of the head feels like it's momentarily moving away from the feet, even though you're flexing. Does that make sense? Yeah. So stop a moment. And before we go into a little rest, let's do the contrastive movement, because very often it's through contrast that we make a distinction between one way of doing something and another. So the next time you go to flex yourself, could you feel like you're actually deflating? You know, when you let the air out of a balloon and it just goes and the balloon just collapses on itself? So could you flex yourself in such a way that you feel like you just scrunch up? Now, what's the contrastive experience? Stop. The contrastive experience is there's a way of flexing yourself where you still stay kind of expanded in yourself and then you round. And those of you who have seen those clowns who play with those blow-up balloons and make all different shapes for kids, you know how they blow up the balloons and then they make swords and hats and the kids love them? You could think that your trunk is like an inflated balloon. If it's overinflated, hard to bend. If it's underinflated, it just bends and scrunches. But if it's inflated just enough, it bends and yet it stays more or less long. So you're flexing and you're generating in yourself a sense of remaining spacious, or if we're going to use another substitute word, tall, long in yourself. And that's a very different way of flexing. And can you now go between those two different ways? Sometimes scrunching yourself up, flexing, and sometimes remaining tall in yourself. Sometimes being small, having the feeling of being small and not much space, and other times having the feeling of being tall and spacious. So continue to do that until you can really discern a difference between those two different ways of flexing yourself. Okay, please stop, rest. Do you remember yesterday how I said with some of the dance students I work with, when they end up doing a lesson at the end, they say, I'm feeling really weird, or they don't even say that, they just say, this feels weird. Do you remember that? Yeah. So what you can expect out of these lessons, and of course the people that you will be teaching, it's good for them to know that what to expect out of these lessons is that they'll start to experience themselves differently. And that different way of experiencing yourself, you might not like it, and that's fine. You don't have to continue with it. But if you do like it, and then you do say to yourself, you know, I think this serves me well. I would like to be like this more of the time. Well, then you take that and you keep on building on it. And that's called practice. But if after reflection you say to yourself, no, I don't think that's useful for me, well, you don't need to follow that line. So each lesson produces a different experience of yourself, and that's what lessons are designed to do. Please return to lying on your left side. And now let me be really clear and definite here. Bend your legs. Now, Susan mentioned this yesterday, but sometimes it's important to re-mention it. Bend your legs to a place where you feel balanced, where you don't have to be concerned with losing your balance. And the you that I'm talking about isn't the conscious you. It's the automatic you, that part of you that tries to keep you safe and keep you balanced while you're busy doing something else. Unless you create the conditions where that, I'm going to keep calling it that automatic you, yes? Unless you create conditions where the automatic you goes checklist, safe, checklist, balanced, you will be struggling against that part of yourself. Some of your muscles will be preoccupied with keeping yourself balanced while you're trying to do something else. So you can see that is not very harmonious. Now this time, instead of having your hand resting on the floor close to you, could you rest it on the floor somewhere in front of you where your elbow could be resting on the floor and your forearm could be resting on the floor? And if that's not possible, well, you can have the forearm a little bit off the floor and the elbow a little bit off the floor. That's fine. That's a latitude you can give to yourself. And have the line of the forearm from the elbow through to the fingertips pointing upwards. In other words, in the same direction that your top of your head is pointing. There's a bend in the elbow. That's it. And now in this position, start to slide your right hand a little bit upwards and come back. And notice that when you do that, the distance of the hand from your right foot gets bigger. And as you return the hand, it gets smaller. So keep that distance in mind, the distance between the hand and the foot. And now let the leg and the foot join into the party. As the hand goes up, the foot goes down. And do that very, very precisely so that they move at the same time in the same amount. So this requires a high degree of precision. Now, what happens with that underneath leg? It stays bent. Now, stop, return to your initial starting position, and let's clarify that again, because I can see that some of you have actually moved away from that. So the starting position is important because it sets you up for what's about to come. The legs are bent. The palm of the hand is on the floor. The elbow is on the floor. Unless, of course, that's difficult for you and then it's off the floor. The fingers are pointing upwards in the same direction as the top of your head. Now, if you want, you can slip that right foot off your left foot and rest it on the floor. The left leg stays bent for the moment. Now, there's your starting block. That's where you're starting from. And this is where you're returning to. Can you feel it? Can you feel your own configuration? The limbs, the torso, that's not the configuration. The elbow is on the floor. Yeah, the palm is on the floor. Yeah, that's the configuration. Now, start to slide the hand and the foot simultaneously, the hand going upwards, the foot going downwards. Relative to your own body. Up is headwards, downwards is footwards. Now, whatever this word means to you, do that. Go incrementally. Go by small increments. Go a little bit, come back. Next time, go a little bit further, come back. Next time, a little bit further, come back. That's it. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. And as you increase the amount of space between the hand and the foot, start to ask yourself, well, how far can I get the hand and the foot apart and as I do that, how do I need to start to move the rest of myself? So you might start off with that left leg bent underneath, but you might need to consider how that leg might need to change its configuration as you go. And the ongoing inquiry is, how far apart can I have that right hand and that right leg? Continue exploring and have in the back of your mind, just somewhere back in there, that this way of moving your right limb, your right arm, and your right leg could gradually move you onto your back. And the reason I said it like that, to have it in the back of your mind, to not have it foregrounded, because if it's in the back of your mind, you have a general direction about where you might be heading, but primarily you're interested in the foreground details of what's going on. When I move like this, what happens between my right shoulder and my right hip? What happens between my right knee and my right elbow? What parts of me are changing contact with the floor? In other words, you become more and more and more acquainted with the details of what you're doing. And as that happens, you have more and more of a say about how to put those details together. And there is the crux of it all. That is exactly what we want, to have a say, because that is our human prerogative. Our human prerogative is to have choice. I think it's called free will. And unless you know what you're doing, how on earth are you going to have a choice? Unless you know the details, what will you change? Now, if you do arrive onto your back, is there a way of arriving there where there is a very controlled fall? In other words, you're letting gravity take you backwards, but you're the one who's determining the speed, the rate at which gravity takes you back. Because believe me, gravity just wants to accelerate you, make you thump against the ground. So I'm listening for sounds of thumping. Yeah. Absolutely. And at the same time, remember principle of no principles? Sometimes you might just want to break that rule a little bit. Go, my breathing is now being affected, but I think if I just change the angle a little bit, now my breathing's better again. Does that make sense? Yep. So you should never hold on to anything dogmatically. That's the bottom line. Because why? Because dogmatism robs you of your free will. Ooh, I tingled through myself when I said that. I really believe that. Now, slowly roll onto your back with the hand and the foot the furthest distance away. No. In that pattern, Sorry, I should have specified. And notice, when you roll onto your back like that, can you feel the difference in length between the two sides? Can you feel, I'm going to use a very highly technical term, can you feel how you're a banana shape? Some of you will have that feeling quite distinct in yourself. Some of you really look like that shape. Right. Now, without disturbing yourself, in other words, without ruffling yourself too much, without stirring the pot too much, could you come up to standing and notice, does that sensation, does that experience of yourself linger when you're standing? Now, funnily enough, you can create that experience without having to even having gone right to the end of the movement. You might feel already in standing that one side of you is quite long and the other side is shorter, lopsided. Now walk a little bit and feel what walking's like when there's this asymmetry present in you. You feel more symmetrical. Okay, so some of you might feel more symmetrical, which means you've gone in the opposite direction to where you tend to go, and now you feel more symmetrical. So here we go again. What experiences emerge out of doing these lessons? Are they predictable? No. But is there an intention of trying to produce a particular way of experiencing yourself Yes. Please lie on your back again. So I just want to qualify what I just mentioned about this idea of designing things that point in a particular direction of experience. And this is what playwrights, artists try to do in their works, right? Yes, there's complexity in their works, but there's difference between a tragedy and a comedy, even though a comedy might have tragedy in it. There's difference between telling a story to make somebody laugh and telling a story to make somebody cry. There's a difference between saying something to somebody in order to prompt them to reflect and saying something to somebody in order to tell them what to do. ATM lessons are no different. There's a movement of design in these lessons that kind of prompt you in certain directions. But each of you start off from a different place. So the experiences can vary. Please lie on your right side. Is the volume still okay? Cool. Good. Although I must admit, when I speak at this volume, I get a little bit more forthright. No, you're not. So could you lie in that same position, the hand on the floor in front of you, the elbow on the floor or close to the floor, the fingertips pointing in an upwards direction. And if you'd like to, you can slip that right foot onto the floor off the left foot. Off the right foot. Yeah, you can slip the left foot off the floor, off the right foot. Sorry, I was still stuck in the past. Now, think the left hand is on the floor in front of you and the elbow is on the floor too. The elbow, that's it, that's it. And give yourself enough space so that you can feel the possibility of moving that arm. Now, once again, you're no longer naive. You know what's coming. And the only thing that's going to be different is that we're going to elaborate it more. That's all. Think of the distance between the hand and the foot, the left hand and the left foot. You know, there's space between those two places. And now do something to distance, to separate more those two places and then come back. And do that many, many times, a little bit. Now, what does a little bit mean at this particular moment? A little bit means the movement is so small that you're not sure whether you're imagining it or actually doing it. It's like on the verge of activation. So you can feel something stirring and you can feel the tendency to move, but there's not much movement happening through space. So move the left hand upwards, move the left foot downwards simultaneously at the same time, and bring them back at the same time. And you're thinking of hand and foot. That's what's in the foreground. In the background is all the rest of you. Now, shift your attention to two different areas. Think of the elbow and the knee. So now in the foreground of your attention are the elbow and the knee and how they move relative to each other. And it's exactly the same movement, but your experience of the movement could change because you're paying attention to something else. So track the elbow and the knee as they move apart and as they return towards each other. The hand is still moving. The foot is still moving. Your shoulder is still moving. The hip is still moving. Your torso is still moving. But they're the two main actors on the stage. The two main actors, the main cast, are the elbow and the knee. All the rest are extras. Okay, so now let's employ two new actors. You've got to distribute the work in this type industry. So now think of the left shoulder and the left hip and start to slide the hand and the foot, the elbow and the knee, but think of the shoulder and the hip. Think of the shoulder and the hip coming apart and then returning. And notice what happens in the trunk when the shoulder and the hip move apart. And when you use intentionally, when you're thinking of your trunk intentionally like that, what happens to your experience of the hand and the arm moving on the floor? Do they feel lighter or heavier when you engage the trunk? When you intentionally start to explore what the trunk is doing. Your right leg is bent. Yeah, that's it. Now go back to the hand and the foot. Return to attending to the hand and the foot. So the action is the same. That hasn't changed. The action remains the same. It's the details that are changing. And now think of the knee and the elbow. And now think of the hip and the shoulder. And switch your attention between those different configurations of attention. Hand and foot, knee and elbow, shoulder and hip. And as you do that, gradually now start to move the hand and the foot further and further away from each other, the elbow and the knee further and further away from each other, the hip and the shoulder further and further away from each other. In other words, you grow the movement in space. And grow the movement in space in such a way that you could gradually come more and more and more in the direction of lying onto your back. That's it. Long, 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 long. And the arm can move in the shoulder. Yeah, that's right. The arm, that's it. The arm can move in the shoulder. Oh, plonk. And then make your way back. Make your way back all the way onto your side again, using exactly the same idea, but in reverse. So there's a moment as you're taking your arm upwards like you are, that it starts to go right above your head, and then it starts to sweep a little bit backwards of yourself. At that point, the shoulder can continue to move, the shoulder joint, the scapula can continue to move and start to involve the chest. In the same way, as your leg gets to the furthest point and continues to go, it can involve the hip joint and the pelvis, and the hand is on the ground. Ooh, whoop. Now, continue for a little while longer and find out, according to your own comfort, how long can you keep the hand and the foot sliding on the floor? Maybe some of you have difficulties or troubles in some of the joints or some parts of your body that prevent you from keeping the hand on the floor. And if that's the case, well, then you keep your hand and your foot on the floor for as long as possible, and then you allow them to lift. What's the parameter that I've set? No, but you haven't, yeah? Yeah. Oh, beautiful. I like it. That's called free will. That's called changing the rules a little bit so that I can move from what feels impossible for me to do to what feels possible. And you know, if you can claim that for yourself, that is the road to perfection. And I'm not being flippant. But what I can see is that you've still got your hand on the floor, which is great. Yeah? Can you feel you have your hand on the floor? That's that. And you know, there's a moment when your palm can actually stop being on the floor and the hand can flip from the palm side to the thumb side to there's a moment when the palm is actually facing the ceiling and the back of your hand could be on the floor. So what's your concept of hand? If I say to you, keep your hand on the floor, does that mean keep the palm of your hand on the floor? Isn't your little finger a part of your hand? Your thumb a part of your hand? The back of the hand is a part of the hand? So can you see that sometimes the concept of what we think things are actually what stand in our way? Lovely. Roll yourself onto your back. And when I said that, roll yourself onto the back, did you use the pattern of action that we were just exploring? Now, as you're lying there, feel the after effect of your investigation. Now, yesterday, we kind of went into that little bit of an abstract discussion about subjective, objective, experiential, conceptual, and so on. So right now, what's your experience of yourself? Having done what you've just done, what's the data? And just to push the metaphor a little bit, having experimented in the way you've just experimented, what are the results? And would the results be different the next time around when you perform the experiment? Or might you have different questions, which would be a different experiment? I love this work. And that was a personal statement on my part. But I just wanted to share that with you. I really love this work because it marries the two things I love most, thinking and moving. I really love it. Please roll onto your right side again. And I think personal statements have a role because, you know, for me to let you know where I'm coming from is as much as important as for me to know where you're coming from as we get to know each other more and more. Lie in that same configuration. And now using the pattern of action, or another way of talking about it, using the kind of composition we've been creating, the way of moving the arms, moving the legs, moving yourself, could you slowly roll onto your back and without stopping, roll onto the other side, staying within the exploration? Now, some of you have already gone out of the exploration because I can see your arm, your hand is not the furthest point from your foot. Remember that detail? Yeah? So this is where experiments, the details of an experiment are important. Because if that test tube hasn't been cleaned, you're going to get crap data. If the instrumentation hasn't been specifically tuned, it ain't going to work. So this is where remembering the details is important. Take the hand and the foot, the elbow and the knee, the right hip and the left hip, as far apart as they can go while you can breathe, and use that to find your way onto your back, and then go to the other side. Yeah, and there's a moment when the hand and the foot will be far apart, and then you start to bring them together, and the elbow and the knee, and the shoulder and the hip. So really, there'll be a moment when you feel that you're the absolute most expansive you can be, and then there'll be another moment when you feel, now I can be kind of enfolded on myself. Your hand is still not as far as away as it can be. Yeah, can you feel that? That's it. Yeah, but without going. Now, to take up a point that was raised a moment ago, if you monitor your breathing continuously, as long as you know that your breathing can continue automatically in the background and you're not doing anything to interfere with it, that's a good state of affairs. Because the breathing is automatically controlled by regions in your brain. It's going to go on, and your job is to create harmony, where the breathing function can continue without you doing anything to interfere with it. So let's have a look. So can you see how there's a long arc? Can you see that long arc in the body? Yeah, so that's what we're looking for. There's a moment when the arc of your body from hand to foot is a really big arc. And all that means is it's like you're lying on a big circumference of a circle rather than lying on a small circumference of a circle. Now, as you're doing that, and I'm lying and watching across the room, what's really nice is that you all have a quality of interruptibility. In other words, I can see that with most of you, actually all of you, that if you wanted to stop at any moment, you could. That's great. That's a sign that you're in control of the movement, and the movement's not necessarily in control of you. Stop a moment and rest. How do you experience yourself having played like you just played? And before we finish, reflect a moment. If you were to do that movement again of lying from one side to the other side by way of experiencing yourself in the longest possible state you can be in, what would you change? What would you do different if you were to re-explore that on your own some other time? What would be your question? What would be your interest? Please roll to one side. Notice to which side you roll. Come up to standing. Feel what it's like to stand. Whoa. And most of the time, that is the question that we'll ask. Feel what it's like to stand. Why? Because standing upright is one of the things that human beings do. It wasn't by accident that when they sent that spaceship Voyager out into outer space, they had two human beings standing upright on it. Not lying down, not curled up, but standing upright. So there's something about standing upright that is fundamentally human. So why not sense how we are prototypically human? And then bipedal walking is also pretty human, so go for a walk. So those two things are the two most common things that we do as human beings. So why not reference those? What's it like to walk? Pay attention to the relationship between the right hip and the right shoulder. Remember that relationship from the floor? Remember that? Every time you step onto that right foot and then push off from that right foot, feel that relationship, right hip, right shoulder. Do you get longer or shorter? Does that distance between shoulder and hip get bigger or smaller when you stand and push? Now, some of you have enough skills to go freeze frame. You just go there and you go freeze frame. Oh, longer. Now, what about the other side? As you step onto that left foot and then push off, what happens with that distance from the shoulder to the hip? Does it get longer? Does the distance between the two get greater or smaller? If you're not sure, just put one hand on the shoulder, one hand on the hip, and feel with the hands. What happens? All right. Let's go into a break, and we'll come back at about just before 5:02. Okay, 20 minutes.